Welcome back to the 2020 podcast. As you see, Drew has gone through a full world wardrobe change at this point. No more red, black for the funeral, black for the Sacramento Kings. Man, Sunday we saw the birth of a dynasty, and I like bathing in the Niners' tears for a little bit, which I would like to say. Honestly, it was such a good game. I know that some people were complaining. They were texting me separately in the first half saying that the game was boring. I had a couple coworkers mainly saying, man, this game kind of sucks. It's not fun. It was 10-3 at halftime, full defensive battle, but it was entertaining. You and I were texting back and forth, the whole game. But I found that the wearing down of the defense and the plays made by the defense were super duper entertaining. I mean, you had everything from defensive battles in the first half to unsung heroes and Juwan Jennings and the kickers going 7 for 7 combined, accounting for 23 of the total points of the whole game. The game was great. So as much as I would love to sit here and stare at you and tell you I'm glad you guys got smashed and lost, the game was so good. Like, damn, you got to do it again. that was just a fun game. Again, the game had everything. And then what ended up happening is the two players that hold the team together and hold the offense together ended up, 8 catches, 92 yards for Travis Kelce after only going 1 for 1 yard in the first half. And then Patrick Mahomes going 16 of 22 and 154 yards in the fourth quarter in overtime, 8 for 8 on his final drive in overtime, rushing for 66 yards, which is a Super Bowl record for a quarterback, joining only Joe Montana, Terry Bradshaw, and Troy Aikman with three or more Super Bowl wins, and then 3 Super Bowl wins and 3 Super Bowl MVPs. Just Joe Montana and Tom Brady with that stat. So bring me through the game through the lens of a fan. I want to hear what went wrong with the Niners, what was right with the Niners, and then a couple of the follow-up things. I mean, between the players not knowing some of the overtime rules, some of the discourse between your offensive linemen tweeting out, you guys firing your defensive coordinator. What's going on with you guys right now through the game and then the aftermath?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime that you expect to win a game, not from a fan's perspective, but from the player's perspective, I think the 49ers were really confident. I feel like they expected to have this win. And I just feel like there's a lot of looking around the room and wondering what happened. Steve Wilkes being fired was not a product of the Super Bowl. It was something that was coming all year. Kyle Shanahan had to burn a timeout late in the game because they came out in a cover zero, and he absolutely hated it. So he burned a timeout to get us out of that cover zero.
Right.
Nick Bosa had some comments about how they weren't prepared for a couple of things the Chiefs threw at them, and there just was a regression of this defense all season from what we've seen in previous years when we haven't lost anyone. We've added talent, and the defense didn't play up to its expectations this year. And Steve Wilkes runs a scheme that isn't what the 49ers have made successful. He likes to blitz a lot. He likes to cover zero a lot. That's not what the 49ers do. That's not what they like to do.
So would you say that the success of the defense, is it mainly based on the players' talent? Is that what you're kind of saying?
I think that the talent on that defense is far better than what they showed this year because the scheme that they were put into. If you take a bunch of 2011 era middle linebackers and you expect them to cover all over the field, or if you take a bunch of zone corners and ask them to play man, Nnamdi Asomugha goes to the Eagles once upon a time, and he's terrible because he was a certain type of corner. And he got put in a different scheme, and it didn't work out for him. Yep. I just think that the scheme that Steve Wilkes wants to run isn't the best scheme. That's what Kyle said in his press conference today. It's nothing against him as a man. It's nothing against him as a coach. It's just his scheme and what he wants to do doesn't fit with what the 49ers want to do. And
especially
frankly,
if you're talking about just quickly talking about blitzing a lot, cover zero, all that stuff. You only really blitz a ton because you can't rush the passer. And if you guys look at your defensive line, you can clearly rush the passer. And blitzing that much when you don't have to is just a detriment to, you're leaving your guys on islands. And if it doesn't work for you, if you don't have to, you should not do it, type thing. So I totally get what you're saying.
Well, and the 49ers in the past have run a lot of cover three. In 2019, when they went to the Super Bowl, Travarius Ward, a backup safety, he played a ton. We play a ton of
Mm-hmm.
quarters. This man's man stuff with blitzing a lot. It's just not what the 49ers like to do. And Nick Bosa had some pointed comments about his production this year and the scheme and other things. And frankly, he has to be better. I think the Super Bowl really just comes down to teams were evenly matched in terms of Patrick Mahomes being the great equalizer. And when you have a player who is on the field purely to hit people and stop Travis Kelsey, and he blows his Achilles out running onto the field, not even in gameplay. I
Yeah.
think that was pretty crushing. And you go back to those stats you mentioned in the beginning of the pod and how they went off in the second half. And that's a product of Dre Greenlaw not being on the field. So kudos to them because injuries happen.
Did you see the
Um,
audio? Did you listen to the audio of everybody when he tore his
no,
Achilles?
I'm not listening to nothing. I haven't,
Yeah, it
I
was
haven't,
pretty bad.
I haven't listened to any podcasts. I haven't been on Twitter. I haven't been on X, Instagram, none of that. I don't want it because frankly, I don't care about anyone's takes on why we lost. We lost because Patrick Mahomes is the second greatest quarterback of all time. That's why we lost. We lost because our defensive scheme in overtime let the guy get wide open. There was multiple times this year it was super frustrating where Fred Warner was put in these crux points where he had to make a decision on player A or player B, and he made a decision and the other player was wide open. And,
Yeah.
and frankly, that comes down to scheme. And I've said it before. I'm a big believer in scheme over talent. I think that you can scheme things, which is what Kyle Shanahan has done in the past. He schemes players wide open. He
Yeah.
makes lesser quarterbacks successful.
Yep.
And when you have a L'Jarius Sneed who held Brandon Ayuk in check, and I know his brother is popping off about how can your all-pro wide receiver only have 3 catches? Oh, it's because he was defended well, and they went
Yeah.
deep. They went deep a couple times and had it. They couldn't make the connection. Trent McDuffie played really well. That's why I went to Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings started gashing them a little bit, and a muffed punt off of the ankle of a rookie defensive back, and there you have it. You lose the Super Bowl. A blown Achilles and a muffed punt is pretty much just like in 2019, a couple of wide open players in the fourth quarter running free that we couldn't make the connection on. But
You guys have been in so many close games, whether it's the Super Bowl or it's the NFC Conference Championship games. You guys have been in so many moments where your teams are really good, and it comes down to a moment, just a moment, a singular moment in this entire game. That's what your entire season comes down to. And, whether it is in the past muff punts or this muff punt
Kyle
or
Williams,
injuries or, blown out elbows or, whatever it is, it comes down to one singular thing that happens that changes the trajectory of not just one game, but players' careers, their futures, everything for you guys.
yeah,
It's
I
amazing
mean,
that you guys are continue to come back as strong as you have.
at the end of the day, Kyle Shanahan's 8-4 in the playoffs. Every NFL team and would sign up for that other head coach.
Yeah.
And we won a game 2 years ago where we couldn't score for shit in Green Bay, and we blocked a punt. Jordan Willis blocks a punt, and Talanoa Hufunga returns it, right there for a touchdown, and we beat the Packers and we move on. So it's just one of those things where it goes one way. I have to say that I am completely heartbroken by what happened in Kansas City today. And not to hijack this, but I just got the tweet about the totals of the injured and everything, and a day that should have been celebrated for them and their team as we're talking about the Super Bowl, and should have been nothing but good things. And you have uh, one person dead and 21 wounded because of senseless violence that went down in there. So um, I don't. I didn't put anything together to say on that, so I don't want to go off on a tangent or anything. But my heart out to Kansas City because today should have been a day of celebration for them, and it turned into a dark day for them. So that sucks, and my heart out to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you some people have only seen the initial posts about um, the 49ers players being unprepared for the overtime rules. I've seen the follow-up posts to that about the delegation and that sort of thing. For the people that aren't aware of what I'm talking about, can you kind of bring them through the 49ers players being, quote, unprepared for this?
Yeah, I think that there was a couple of interviews that I did catch. Kyle Juszczyk mentioned, and he went to Harvard. That's the
Yeah.
famous thing with Juszczyk, right? They were told in the beginning of the season what the overtime rules were. They had forgotten. Frankly, I think Kyle Shanahan's decision to take the ball was sound. The defense was gassed. They were tired. We took the ball. We go down and score a touchdown. Now you have if we did, obviously we didn't.
Mhm.
Personally, I think we should have gone for it there, but that's okay. If you stop Mahomes, and we had Mahomes, we had the Chiefs on a 4th and 1,
Yeah.
with the Super Bowl in our hands, and they made a nifty little play where it was either guard Kelsey or guard Mahomes, and they needed 1 yard and they got it. But if they go down and score there, then we get the ball back in sudden death. So you get to score first, you get to rest your defense, you get the ball back. I didn't hate that. I think a lot of what people were confused about is I think the defense was kind of standing around towards the end because they thought they were going to call a timeout because the time was running out. I
Right.
think that they thought that the play was going to be stopped or something like that. But not realizing that if the time clock runs out, it just goes to the second quarter of overtime. So
Yeah.
that might have been some issues there. But at the end of the day, I don't really think it's the head coach's responsibility. And I'm not trying to make an excuse for him. I'm just saying I don't think it's something that they set the responsibility for him to teach everybody the overtime rules. Um,
Right.
if the defense was unprepared at the end, they should have called a timeout and got their wits together. And frankly, it was just disappointing to see how easy they scored there at the end. So I think it's just one of those things. You have a room full of people that fully expected to win a football game and they didn't, and then they're kind of just searching for answers. And then, the UFC has adopted this rule where they don't interview fighters after they've been knocked out because they look dazed and confused and they don't really know what they're saying. I think it's
Yeah.
one of those things. You just had an entire football team that was heartbroken and they were just asking questions and they were reacting rawly raw. They were, raw emotion is how they were
Yeah.
reacting. And so, yeah, we were a little confused there at the end, but you know what? It's the greatest quarterback of all time minus Brady, and certainly probably one of the top 5 most talented quarterbacks. Maybe not statistically wise, Brady's got it, but I don't think anyone would argue that Mahomes isn't more talented than Brady was. Um, it just is what it is. I think that as long as they win one, having your legacy be we got to the Super Bowl 3 times and we lost twice to Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes before we got it back.
Mm.
And the 49ers are already favorites to win next year, which again, I think is stupid. I don't know how you don't favor the Chiefs, but it's not like, we're losing some free agents. We'll go over that later, but we're obviously going to add talent. We're always active around the trade deadline. And the
Yeah,
one
for
thing I
sure.
got to say is we got a really young quarterback that's only going to get better. So,
Yeah, and you guys have quickly turned around to pre-Super Bowl. It was save us Brock Purdy, save us 49ers. We don't want to see the Chiefs win and Taylor Swift and the Travis Kelce stuff. Excuse me. And quickly turned around with the overtime stuff, the discourse between your offensive linemen of I'm pretty sure it was John Feliciano, who's out there tweeting out and blaming people, and this whole back and forth and stuff being brought up from week 13 with Jalen Carter now, and other stuff that's happening as well, quickly turning around to being like, oh wow, these guys are almost turning into really unlikable. And the discourse on Brock Purdy is just being turned up to 12. At this point, I saw a guy trying to break down that play. Chris Jones goes and he breaks through. He breaks through and he makes Brock Purdy have to make a quick decision to try to force a ball somewhere, and it obviously doesn't land where they want it to land. Where I believe it was Brandon Ayuk who was open in the end zone, and he's just saying, "Well, a better quarterback gets that, gets away from that, and the better quarterback extends that play a little bit longer." Yeah, sure. Not a lot of quarterbacks can extend a little bit longer past where it was. I mean, Chris Jones broke through pretty much immediately. There's only probably three quarterbacks who can extend a little bit longer and get the ball to where they want to get it. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson because the athletic ability. There's only a very few amount of quarterbacks could have extended it longer than it already was. It's not like he had all this time in the world and all of a sudden he has no pocket presence and he gets blindsided. It's not what the case was. The Brock Purdy discourse and the hate for him, again, we've seen it all season, but it's being turned up to 11 and 12 at this point. It's a little ridiculous. Once again, I'm tired of hearing it, but we're going to go through the same song and dance for the next couple of years, it feels like. Anything to add?
I'm not going to go into the whole Jalen Carter thing. The 49ers head of security confirmed the Jalen Carter threatened to murder Feliciano and his family story. And we know Jalen Carter had character issues before the draft. And then Jalen Carter continued in the weeks after that 49er Eagle game to threaten in a way. Here's the thing, though. I don't really give a shit about what's said on a football field outside of pure straight racism, which is not okay. I don't really care what anybody says. And frankly, Spencer Burford admitted to he did not follow the scheme of that last play. He went off of instinct. He didn't follow the scheme. And if he had followed the scheme, he would have picked up the Chris Jones block and the outside rusher would have been a little more free. And the guy guarding Brandon Ayuk fell over and Brandon Ayuk was wide open, but the play was designed for Jawan Jennings and Jawan Jennings was going to be wide open also. So it's just like last year in the NFC Championship game when Brock Purdy got his elbow blown out. Brandon Ayuk was wide open in the end zone. It was going to be a touchdown until it wasn't. It's going to be a touchdown, but it wasn't. I'm not going to blame the right guard for one moment of one play when he's probably acted on instinct all year. And frankly, the way they run their defense, they heavily disguise their blitzes. They were bringing people from places and Brock Purdy's been amazing against the blitz this year. Yeah. But you see their defense and the way they ran their defense with their blitzes, and you understand why Wilkes is getting fired, because nothing Steve Wilkes did all year in relation to his blitzes surprised anybody. So if you are going to blitz when you don't need to, you need to be surprising people, and it didn't work. And frankly, I would expect somebody on staff to take over the defensive coordinator job next year, unless they get a Ron Rivera or something like that. But believe that Kyle Shanahan has schemed this defense the way he wants it because he knows how to break defenses. So we run a defense that he likes, that he's schemed because he believes in it. And they're going to hand that playbook to the next defense coordinator and say, you're running this, you're calling these plays. Right. And that's what it's going to be. They went outside of the comfort zone this year to bring in Wilkes, and it didn't work out. So,
yeah. Well, with that, in their win on Sunday, the Chiefs became the NFL's first repeat champions in nearly 20 years since the 03-04 Patriots.